Welcome back to part 2 of building a simple graphical user interface with Python and Qt. So where we left off last time is we had used Qt Creator to generate our user interface, and then we used a command, PyGui5, to convert that UI file to a Python file, which would have a Python class in it that defines our main window. Okay, so now we're going to write code to actually start doing it. Now, because this is a full application, there's a few things we need to import. So we need to import the system library, and we also need the Qt widgets. And the ones we're going to need is, because this is the main window, this is the full application, and this is where we're launching it from, we're going to import the application too. For other widgets like dialog boxes and such, you wouldn't need the full application. There's a few things we need here to actually kick off the entire program, but after that, once they're imported, you wouldn't need it for following ones. So the first ones will have a little bit more to it. So we also need to import QMainWindow, because that's the type of interface that we started off from Qt. So we're going to import the application, main window, and of course now we need to get out of that file that we generated, we need to import that class. So UI main window, if you remember, was the Python code that we generated from our GUI builder. Alright, so in here we're going to write our class here, main window. Why did it give me? Oh, because I was expecting a doc string. Okay, so we'll do our init function to start the class, and what we'll do is we'll create a variable here, main win, which will be our main window that we generate. And what I'll do is I'll create self UI. UI will be the class that was generated before. So when we generated that code, it created a class, and we're going to create an instance of it here. So we'll say UI main window. Alright, so whenever we reference any of the items in that user interface, we're going to do it by accessing self.ui. So self.ui will be that interface that we generated. And we're going to call setup UI, because if we go back into that generated code, you'll see this function here, setup. So we need to create an instance of this class, and then we run setup, which will run all that code there. So if I come back here, we've created a new instance, and now we're actually running that function to generate everything that we need. Alright, now that's basically what we need for that class. However, when we actually want to go show this window, we need to create this extra function here called show, and all that simply does is call the main window. So that's basically our application, and we'll call show on that. So the main window show, which we're going to need in a second. Alright, so that's basically our class. Now we have to be able to launch it, so when this program starts, we can either put in here a little section here that determines if this file is being run to launch the whole application, or we could go put this next lot of code in a separate file. Because I've come from other languages, I tend to put it in a separate file, but I'm finding that I'm the odd one out. So we'll make the entry point to this program right here. So if somebody came and clicked on this file to run it, to run the whole application, we just need to check if that's the case. So we do the old Python convention. So if we're saying that you clicked on this because you thought this was the main file to launch the whole application, so we just make that check here. If you think this is the main application, then we'll run it from here. And we'll create this variable, the app will become a new Q application. Okay, so you can see that just got little squiggly just went from underneath it because we're now using it. So we need that framework of, that's pulling from the library. We're going to do a Q application, and then within that we're going to create this main window. So I'll just say Q application, And sysargv is basically saying if any other parameters are passed to it when it starts. So if somebody launched this from the command line and added some other things to the end of the command when they want to launch our program, we could access that here. We're not going to use it, but we still need to be able to have that there to handle it. Okay, so also create the main window, which will be our class here. So we've created a main window. So we're going to create an instance of that. Okay, so we've got our application, we've got our main window now, and the last thing is we actually want to show it. So main window show, and when you click the X up in the corner, we want to end it. So we'll execute the application inside the exit call. So when the application finishes, when the window finishes, the application closes, the whole thing finishes. Okay, so let's just see how that goes if we run it at this stage. So we'll go to the main win here, and we'll run main win. See if we get an error. Oh, we did get some errors. Line 13. Oh, of course, because we need to pass in our main window. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, set up this file, but we've created a main window here, and we need to pass that to the setup file of the UI main window. So basically we're using out of the library a main window, then we've got this generated code that takes the main window and adds all the components to it. So we have to give that UI our main window to actually work on. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, and here we have our window. So we've done it. Simple as that. This code here from line 19 on, that's boilerplate code. That's basically going to be the same for every application. You only have that when you create the main window. All the other components inside, if we go design them separately as separate UI files, you don't need any of this. This is just the entrance, the setup for when you're using a Qt library. Now you can see the buttons will work, but nothing happens because we haven't actually coded any of that in yet. But we've got our main window, and let's see if it stretches. Yep, and all our components move, which is fantastic. So that's step one. Now we've got to just implement the functionality of when we click yes, it changes this. So what I want to do at this point is I want to wrap that up into a function. So let's say when you click the yes button, so I'll say on yes button clicked. So I've got a bit of self-documenting code here. So if that happens, I'll say self UI because I want to access that user interface. Now that label that had the text on it, I'll just go back to Qt here. You can see this label here. I didn't rename that, it's just called label. So if I go back here and I say self UI, there'll be an element there called label, which there is. Okay, so now I've got access to that label. What I want to call on it is this function here, set text. You can see there's all these functions coming up. All this simply does is take a string and I can set the text to whatever I want. So because that's yes button clicked, I'll say yes, put it in capitals, yes is the answer. Okay, so that's that function done. I also want one for on no button clicked. I'll do a very similar thing. Go to self UI so that accesses that user interface. I want to work on the label and I want to set the text of that label to the answer is no. Okay, so I've got my two functions there, but what I haven't done is I've just made these functions. What I haven't done is hooked up that event. When I actually click on the button, when I actually click on this yes, how does it know to call that function? So back up here in my init section, I'll just put a comment here, connect signals. So when you click on something, it generates a signal, and the function that it calls is what we call a slot in Qt. So I'll say connect signals to slots, and I'll say self UI yes button. So okay, on the self UI yes button, when that is clicked, when that one gets clicked, well actually on that event, I want the clicked event to connect to the onYes button function. And because I'm calling the function, I'll just leave those brackets out. Okay, so now what this line does is it says from my user interface, there's an element there called yes button, When it gets clicked, I want you to send that signal. I want to connect that to this function in this class, in this self class, onYes button clicked. So that will call this function here. And I want to do exactly the same thing. So I'll copy that. I'll paste it here, and I'll change yes to no in both cases. So when the no button is clicked, connect it to the function down here on no button clicked. Okay, so let's run that and see what happens. So we've got our window again. It's all resizing. The text says nothing has yet changed. Let's click on yes. Yes is the answer. Click on no. The answer is no. Okay, and so from here you've got all the building blocks now. You can see I've created an application. I can click the X and disappear out of that. And I can just add more functionality here. So I could go back into my user interface now. You go back in here. I can start adding more things, changing it around. All I have to do is regenerate that file, and I can go back here and I can connect to more items. I don't need to change anything else in here. If I add more items, they'll just suddenly appear. I'll just say self UI, and there'll be some new widget or button, whatever it is, and I can connect that up to another function as well. And I can access these items, so the UI label here, and I can call functions on it like set the text, and I can control all my user interface through self.ui. Okay, so as you can see, there's not a whole lots of lines of code. This one you may or may not break out into a separate file called main. And this is really, that's all the code it took to do that graphical interface. That's it for this class. And I could do my my setup graphically here. So it really is simple, quick and easy to put together a desktop application, a good robust application using Python and Qt, and you'll be surprised, just Google it, how many commercial applications, big applications that I'm sure you're using right now somewhere on your computer is written with these tools. So it's a real industrial strength programming language and widget set. Okay, and that's it. Enjoy your GUI programming.